Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the podcast answering the question, how did they get there? I'm your host, Kim Minnick. Each episode, I invite a guest to complete a reflective exercise, plotting the ups, downs, and everything in between of their career against a line of neutrality called a journey line. My guest today, Stacey Nordwall. Stacey, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? It's great to be here.
It's so great to have you. I am so excited. Longtime fan, new friend. What do you got going on these days? Let's start there.
Well, currently I'm the VP of People Strategy at PIN. And PIN is an employee experience, employee comms platform. And so because we're a small team, I get to do a little bit of a lot of things. So I do our in-house HR and build a lot of foundations for, growing company. But then also, because it's an HR tech product, I am also, talking to the marketing team and doing thought leadership pieces and, bringing that voice of the HR buyer, same thing with the product itself. I'm in there helping with the product content and, really bringing that voice of HR into the product itself. So it's a pretty good situation for me where I get to do a lot of things. And you'll see that that's kind of my thing. I like to do a lot. I like to do a lot of different things. So it works for me.
Oh my gosh. So that covers professionally. What else you got going on personally or holistically, just outside of work?
I mean, not a lot. I'll just say, for context, I am in Phoenix and it has been 150 degrees for 3 months, basically.
You are frying eggs on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I have just melted from the top down. And so there hasn't been too much going on over the past week or so. It has started to cool off. So I am dreaming about some sweaters that I bought, just waiting for when I can wear them, thinking about going on hikes again and leaving my house. I adopted a cat over the summer. So that has been at least some sort of entertainment. But
and I'm sure the cat does not want you to leave the house. Cat is very happy with you home.
That is true. Very, very happy with me being a homebody. So yeah, it works out.
All right. Well, we are here to discuss your career journey, which I am so excited. Before we met face to face, I had been following you as kind of a HR thought leader, if I could call you that, maybe. So I'm really excited to dive into your background and how we got here. I've got your journey line up in front of me. I'd encourage our listeners to peep that link below and check it out. But kick us off. I see that we're in college, but where are we at in time and space?
So this is, oh God, do I actually want to voice the year?
No, I don't think you need to voice the year. No, we don't need to voice the year. Let's just say, as I think most of my guests can at this point, the late 1900s and or turn of the century.
Yeah, that's great. Right around that time. It's funny because when, doing this exercise, I don't think I've ever really tried to create a story or think about my career in terms of like all of it. And originally I wasn't going to include college because I was like, why? That's 1,000 years ago at this point. And, who cares?
Turn of the century.
Yeah. Turn of the century at this point. So irrelevant, but I included it because as I was thinking about everything, like more broadly, the actual journey, it kind of felt like, there are 3 kind of themes or tensions that I see throughout my entire journey, and they started here. And so I was like, okay, great. I guess I'm going to include that. I think, I grew up in Arizona, and I decided to go to college in the Bay Area. And at the time, again, like kind of thinking about my broader journey, the first kind of theme that stuck out to me was like, I really always had this tension around risk and like, am I playing it too safe? And really felt like I have throughout my career maybe played it too safe and not taken enough risk. But then as I thought about all of these different things that I did, I was like, I've taken all kinds of big leaps. Like I've leapt back and forth across the country, done all kinds of different things, which, and sometimes I did play it safe, which, when you think about the fact that someone who, was around in the turn of the century, as it were, has already been through multiple global financial crises, sometimes you stick around at a place because you need to stick around at a place.
Sometimes stability is nice for a minute. Sit down, take a break, grab a breath.
Exactly. Right. So, I'm kind of like within all of that context, it felt like, okay, that is one of the themes. And this is one of the first times where I did kind of take a leap. Like I had never been to Northern California before I went to school. I never visited the campus. Like I didn't really know that much about it, to be honest. But I went. I just rocked up and it was like, here I am. I'm doing this thing right now. This is what I'm doing.
Why NorCal? Why Bay Area? Just a calling, just an acceptance letter? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of part of it was like the second tension for myself or theme that I kind of noticed throughout was really this like push and pull around the idea of status and around the idea of like, do big names matter? Do titles matter? Do big company names matter? And for me, I always felt like they didn't personally matter, but I also recognized how much they tended to matter or seemed to matter to other people. And so the college I went to was Stanford. And the reason being that I, applied to a bunch of different places and it was complete. Let's be real. This is back pre-internet, really. I found out about schools because somebody would come to my high school and I'd be like, okay, maybe, I got to get out of class. So that was great. I filled out, little note cards and got catalogs sent to me.
I remember that. It was packages.
I'm like, thick. You're just, paging through, looking at all these amazing photos and like thinking about what wow, this could be me. And I, so the places that I applied to were pretty random. It wasn't like I was like, I need to apply to all elite schools. That's not what I did. But when I got into Stanford, my dad, who had graduated from ASU, said, you're going. And it wasn't even like I was, that wasn't my top pick. But it was my dad's top pick because he said, I went to ASU. He worked in the federal government and he said, the people here, they come from these big name schools and they basically don't respect folks like me who have these kinds of degrees from these schools. Right. And for him, it really was status matters. If you're going to be out in the world, that status matters. And if you got in there, that's where you're going. So,
and fair enough, trying to help out his daughter. Like, hey, here's what I've learned and here's the opportunity you've got. And I don't know if maybe they financially supported it, but certainly tilted the scales, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, the financial aspect of it is a whole other thing, right? Because I came out, certainly my entire family came out with a lot of debt on the other side. I don't know if that was worth it. But, that is really like part of why I ended up on this journey. And I think throughout my career have had this sense of, do I go to work for the big name companies? Should I fight for this title? Knowing that some of these things don't really matter to me, but probably matter to others.
But maybe they should. So you go to Stanford.
Yeah.
Degree?
Huh?
What was your degree in?
Oh, I did a double major in psychology and communication.
Okay.
So yeah, I think, here's the thing. This is also what the third theme is. I didn't have a plan. And
nor do most 18-year-old humans going away to college for their first time. Like what? How are we even supposed to plan for that?
No. But the thing is, I also then have never had a plan after either, which
look, it's fine. It's fine.
But I basically, my freshman year, I met people who are my best friends to this day, right? And so I think for me, the experience was I was the friends. I did things that I wanted to. I got to be a radio DJ at KZSU. I did a bunch of different things. And when I graduated, the day of graduation, the single thing that I remember was basically shitting my pants in terror because I was like, what do I do now? I just had no idea. It was just fear. The whole day, I just was in fear because I realized I had to actually figure some things out. Which again is, I think I have never really navigated my career with a plan. So maybe it's just consistent.
Yeah, maybe that urgency and terror is kind of a low key status quo, but I can imagine there you are, day of graduation, again, being thrust into something totally new and different, having no idea what's next. And according to your journey line, it looks like you landed at a startup, maybe kind of neutral.
Yeah, I ended up that I did do a few things in pretty rapid succession after graduation. I worked at a research institute. I worked at a startup. I decided to go to film school for 3 minutes, moved across the country to DC, moved back. I worked at PBS for a minute. For a literal minute, probably.
Did you get any tax information from them the following year?
Okay, so maybe a minute and a half. But yeah.
Okay, great. Got it.
Yeah. And I really was just trying to, figure out what was interesting to me, what worked for me. And at some point, I think I still was really very drawn to the Bay Area and really felt hey, I had built all of these friendships. And I still want to be where my friends are. And so I moved to Oakland ultimately. And that was again, kind of not as big of a leap, I would say, but still I moved to Oakland. I didn't have a job. I had a temporary place to stay with a couple of friends. And that was it. It was you got maybe 2-3 months to figure it out.
And roughly, if you don't mind me asking, about what age is this? Early 20s, late 20s?
I mean, this is probably 23.
Okay. And you've moved to Oakland from DC.
Yeah.
Okay. So there you are back with your friends. That San Francisco fog gets into your skin and draws you back. Yeah. I truly believe that.
It really does.
Tell me about some of these startups you were in. Tell me about some of the corporate nonprofits. What was that time in Oakland like for you?
Yeah, let's see. So, I mean, Oakland is a long period of time. I lived there for many, many years. So that kind of spans quite a bit, but I worked for, let's see, I'm trying to remember when I was back, an environmental and infrastructure firm. I worked for a small business. I ended up at a fintech startup. And during that time, this is kind of cause it's all kind of mashed in there together. I also decided, I'm not really none of these things feel meaningful to me. And that's why I ended up going to get my master's degree in counseling psychology. So I was doing that concurrently with working, with working first at a small business and then at the fintech startup.
So full-time student, full-time worker.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, that feels like a lot because looking at your journey line, you kind of have working at these small businesses and startups down at the bottom, going back to school for your MFT a little bit above that line of neutrality. How did you find that balance?
Oh, I didn't. I was a husk of a human being.
Great. Perfect. Excellent.
I mean, working close to full-time or full-time and going to school full-time is not easy. Clearly, And I think also, just by the nature of what the counseling psychology program is, it was for me a 3-year program with the third year, partially you're doing like an internship or like a traineeship. And so you're placed somewhere really like doing the thing. And when for me, I was placed in a West Oakland middle school, and I'm trying to help those, middle school kids who are going through some really challenging and dark things, at the same time that I'm trying to, finish this program, that I'm trying to work, near full time. And it was rough. I mean, it was really, really rough. And I was just constantly exhausted. And I think also I had put a lot of pressure on myself too, because I had at the time felt like, well, you've been out of school for so long. You're going to be the oldest person there. You're going to, you probably don't even know how to school anymore.
You don't know how to school. But looking back, like you didn't really have a plan for school to begin with. So even going into school, you didn't know how to school.
I mean, I think the thing is, I've always been good at school, right? It felt like a thing that I knew that I could do, but then having that break, it was like, maybe I don't know how to do it. Maybe I can be successful. And, all of these things. And now looking back on that, I'm like, oh, how ridiculous. Because I was probably in my how old was I when I started? I think I was maybe 34 or something. And I'm like, who cares? I wasn't the oldest person. And even if I was, who cares?
And you're starting a graduate degree, which is a little bit different, I assume. I imagine there's a larger variance.
Yeah. Yeah, there was. But yeah, I mean, also, like I said, looking back at it now, being older, I'm like, that was not old.
I was so young then.
Yeah, it wasn't. But yeah, I think, it was a really tough experience. And ultimately I kind of realized this is not for me. I don't think that I can, the amount of, emotional load, I don't know how else to put it, that there is from being a therapist, especially, when you are dealing with some really challenging situations. I thought I cannot imagine myself doing this for hour after hour, year after year. I just can't imagine doing it.
I mean, such to your point, such emotional labor, so much of yourself going into that. I'm curious, as you balance this, I assume unpaid internship sort of work.
Yeah.
Yay. Great way to start off a career field, you guys. What sort of work were you doing to get paid? Because I imagine you didn't have a lot of space for emotional labor in your paid job.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably also why it made it so challenging, because at that, and the first half of that, I was at a small business, and it was, and that was fine, but it really, in terms of that emotional labor, but I did not enjoy it. It really was draining me. And I was not feeling any kind of this is meaningful or purposeful, or I'm enjoying this from it. And so I had moved over to being, for the second half of the program, I ended up at this fintech startup. And the environment there was so I was kind of doing all the office and HR and all of the things, and helping to scale this company up, and then laying people off, and scaling up and laying people off, and having that kind of
redirecting and changing and
having that kind of dynamic. So that was very stressful. So that's where I was making money and able to support myself to get through the program, do the unpaid work that I was doing as part of the program. But that wasn't a kind of a light place to be. It was also very challenging. And so the two of those things together definitely made for a rough time.
I feel like startups are sometimes the property of gas in your life. If you have any extra space or time, it's probably going to be taken over by that early stage startup. Maybe you felt the same way then.
Yeah. I mean, it was really challenging too, because I felt like in many ways, that was almost my HR boot camp, or being more so. 'Cause in the small business, it was much more admin focused with like a little bit of HR. And then moving to the startup, it kind of flipped that, which meant that I was also kind of constantly having to learn on the job of what was happening there. And then also constantly learning within the program as well. So it definitely felt like a grind. It was not easy. I don't know if I'd do it again.
It's a lot of stretching and a lot of growth, and like humans can only do so much.
Yeah.
But you persist, you finish school, graduate. I'm assuming graduate.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, right. So when I graduated, and I was like, ah, crap. I got this degree and I don't want to use it. Really.
Hooray!
Like,
I did it.
Oops. And to really put it in more context too, though, I would have had to do another, 2,000 hours or something of unpaid or possibly unpaid work to then sit for the license anyway, which also felt unachievable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really great way to set these people up for success that we need.
Yeah,
this is a needed career field and we are just putting in every blocker we can, huh?
Yeah. When you ask why there is a lack of a certain profession, you might want to look to see how it is that people get into that profession. If it's a lot of unpaid work, then you have your answer for why there aren't that many in the field. But ultimately, I had the degree. It didn't change my feeling, even though I knew I didn't want to be a therapist. It didn't change my feeling about really finding people fascinating. Understanding how people behave, understanding how they think. Wanting to help people grow, like all of that still existed. And also part of the program, which I really appreciated, was that, as a therapist, it's important when you are sitting with a client that you are not bringing all of your own bullshit into the room. And so, so a large part of the program was also like, what's your bullshit? What are the stereotypes? What are the, limiting beliefs? What are the things that you think or believe or feel that you might bring into a room? And how do you become aware of that? And so there was a lot of work also around understanding all of that kind of stuff as well. And so, that I was already at this startup, that I was already kind of doing HR work, that I'd had this experience in the program, and kind of realized that, therapy, being a therapist wasn't for me. It was like, okay, but I kind of see this path ahead. I can see how there are things that I can take from what I've learned and bring it into this world of work, to bring it into, HR and employee experience. And so it was like, okay, great. This is the path. This is what I'm going to do.
Look at you finally finding a path and making somewhat of a plan. It just had to take you exploring all of your bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? You have to, I think in some ways it's hard to know what really works for you. It's hard to know what really excites you without trying some things. And if anything, I can say that I tried things.
Snaps for that. And as you try things, you make another leap. You go to Culture Amp.
Yes.
Maybe a leap, maybe a shoots and ladders, more of a shoots situation. Tell me about your time at Culture Amp. I think a lot of people ops folks have probably at least heard whispers of this name before. Yeah, tell me about your experience there. How'd you get there? What happened?
Yeah. So, the startup that I was at prior to Culture Amp, it really, culturally, I thought like, this is not great. There, it could really improve, and here's how we could do it. And I had learned about culture gap. And at that time, this is again, when I said at the beginning kind of about the whole idea of status and working for big name companies, culture gap may be, especially with our field, may be more of a big name now. At that time, it wasn't. And most of my career, I never really made much of an attempt to work for big tech because I was like, that's not.
I'm tiny tech. I like small.
I like getting in early. I like getting into like real, like smaller orgs, startup, building, all of that. So the startup that I've been at, I think the culture needed help. And so I had found out about Culture and, did a demo with them, and I was like super excited. And, the org I was at was kind of like, what, they weren't particularly interested.
Sure. Great job.
Well, okay, great culture. So I just kept following them. I'm like, no, you know what? The way that Culture Amp talked about it, and even as they talk about it now with like the people science component and all of that stuff, I was like, here's a company that really cares about culture, that cares about employee experience, that like values psychology, right? And those kinds of things, which obviously all very much resonated with me. And so, eventually I saw that they had their Series A, and I was like, okay, I kept looking. I'm like, I know that they're going to list a job. I know that they're going to list a job. And they didn't. But what they did have was they had on their site, it was just like a one sentence. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but it was something to the extent of, if you're interested, but you don't see something here, drop us a line. And I was like, oh.
You see that every once in a while, like, hey, email careers at, or apply for this talent pool. Like, those are real.
And that's the thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to explain to them exactly why they need to hire me. Obviously, like I am the perfect person for this org. They're going to want me. And I sent it off, and then I was like, you are so dumb. Nobody's ever going to look at this or respond.
This is never going to happen. What a dumb idea. Glad I just shared all of my personal information with an internet portal.
They're going to think that I am, a weird fangirl or, something like that. I don't know. But that's not what happened. What happened was I got an email back from a couple of the founders that were like, hey, yeah, let's meet.
I love that. And I have no shame in weird fangirling over companies I love. I love that you took that approach. So, and it paid off.
Yeah. So it surprised me, but it did work. So I made the leap over to Culture back when in 2015, when they had just recently opened, or I want to say opened the office in San Francisco. We were in a workspace. We were in a tiny room that we called a fishbowl, where people had to, I sat elbow to elbow with Stephen Wong. And if one of us had to go to the bathroom, then the other one had to like scoot their chair in, and all of that, right? It was that tiny.
Really close team, close knit.
Yes. We're right next to each other for however many months. I mean, I was at Culture for 5 years. It was really like, it was, a real, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it was a real grind in a way, because when I started, we were 30 people between Melbourne and San Francisco primarily. And by the time I was laid off in 2020, we were in three countries, 4 main cities. We had 400 something people. So it was just like, I mean, I know that that's not a scale up as some other orgs have, but it was a real like build, learn constantly. So it was a grind.
Yeah. I mean, you're still thinking about a headcount growth of 370 employees. Plus, this was during the land of milk and honey times. I think turnover was regular and we were always, so that growth is phenomenal. And 2015 is when I moved to San Francisco, working in HR and started to hear about whispers of Culture Amp. So I think this is where our journey lines kind of, where I start being a weird fangirl. Um, totally fine. Tell me a little bit about, so you just shot your shot. What was the role? What were you hired to do? Like, what was your life at Culture Amp besides the grind like?
Yeah, I mean, I think over time, like I kind of initially came in as uh like that mixed role of, well, you know how it is at startups, you're like, you just do the things, do the things, right? So you're doing the HR stuff, the office stuff, whatever needs to get done that isn't kind of neatly sitting in somebody else's role. And that's really, what I was doing. I focused a lot of my time there in people ops. So, I mean, especially because like you said, there's a lot of onboarding, there's a lot of exit, there's benefits, you're moving from a PEO to a benefits broker to this platform to that, like you're doing all of those kinds of things, as the company is growing. And so it was it was very people ops focused.
It's all the things I'm like, oh God, that sounds so fun. PEO to broker. What a joy.
Oh no. Meanwhile, that's the stuff that just makes me sad.
Look, it takes a village. It takes a village.
I think over time, I mean, I moved more into also then starting to develop some of our like people programs and things along that line, because for me, like it was in the people ops grind for quite some time that I needed just something to be different. I needed some change and some, to feel like I was also learning, because in that kind of environment, like there's so much going on, because you're trying to the whole uh mission of the company is like culture focused, right? So you're trying to do all of these things that it's like, it's not enough to kind of do this kind of a program at this level. You have to do it at this next level, and you have to be more innovative and more out of the box and better and different and meet all of these expectations that are incredibly, incredibly high, and do it with nothing.
I mean, if you're touting like, hey, our platform will make your culture better, people are going to really scrutinize what's happening and what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm sure you felt that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It was really challenging for that reason, because you knew you had that expectation from others, but you had that expectation of yourself as well. You're like, man, this is the place. Like, I need to step up, and here's my place to kind of do all the things that I want to be able to do. And, you kind of get all like very much in that mode. Which I think for me is like what kind of ultimately perpetuated just being burnt out, for like most of the time that I worked there, if I'm honest. I mean, really, like, I think I was always, trying to operate at this really high level, not having, having a really small team, and really having just like these very high expectations of delivery, of, living up to this culture first promise. And it was hard. And I think it was hard too, because you realize, and this is, a lot of HR folks go through this, where you realize that like there is such a big gap between the experience you're delivering for others and the experience you're having. And it's like, oh, rough,
Wow. I feel like that hit me in a place I didn't care for. Because truly, well, truly, you are constantly, because I've been there too. You're trying to provide this great experience. You're balancing all of the things that people ops tries to balance. Maybe you're kind of hating your life and you're burnt out, but you're hoping that you succeed in this crazy mission that you set. And you're like, cool, if I can just do it for everyone else, this will be fine. But it's not fine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a real challenge. And I think, may, I feel like this is another thing that maybe HR folks in general feel is like, we can put a really heavy burden on ourselves to like not care for ourselves in that service of I need to provide this experience for other people. I can't let other people down. I can't let other people, slip through this crack or whatever. Meanwhile, you're just kind of crumbling beneath that anyway. So I think that was definitely how I was feeling during a lot of that time, is really trying to deliver what I believed needed to be delivered, and that experience that I wanted people to have, and kind of living up to this mission and this journey of what the company was. And also, really, I know a lot of folks talk about this sense of like, well, work isn't your family. And I don't think I felt that way, but what I felt was it was my identity. Like this brand, this mission really became part of my identity. And that makes it that much harder to fail in a way, right? Or to not deliver. It feels like that's kind of a direct impact to your identity.
Yeah. And when you start in a world where you're literally elbow to elbow with your coworkers and you scale to 400 people over 5 years, like I imagine there is a deep sense of connection because you all have been through so much impactful changes in your professional lives, which is like a third or more of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially maybe at early stage companies and startups is probably different than in, bigger orgs. I just guess that you have a different sense, like it becomes your identity because sitting there really building it. You feel like you are a part of it becoming a real thing and creating it. And so it hits a little bit different.
Well, after pouring yourself into your career and really, providing the culture first experience for hundreds and hundreds of people, I imagine there was a lot of celebration and fanfare and gratitude and excitement. Tell me about your departure.
Yeah, that's not exactly how it happened.
Oh, is that not what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, and to what people say when they're like, "Hey, your job isn't your life, your job isn't your family, your job isn't these things," right? Yeah, doing all of that, pouring all of myself into it, did not prevent me from being unceremoniously laid off over Zoom at like the height of the pandemic.
Oh, well, hey, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that, right? Like, but it's, and that's the thing. It is kind of I would not want to say a good reminder, but it is a good reminder, a necessary reminder that, yeah, it is a job. Right?
It's a job.
Ultimately.
And at the end of the day, the bottom line will probably be more important than someone's employment.
Yeah. And, you have, like I said, you have this real sense of, I've helped to build this. I've helped to create this. But ultimately, and that, not that that's not true. Ultimately, unless you're an owner, you're an employee, right? So, it could happen at any time, ultimately.
And, if this is too personal, tell me, but like, we've talked about how much of your identity was kind of tied to this, how much of the mission really, and then you are height of the pandemic where we can't find in-person community so easily. Yeah. You're laid off. So you have lost the community that like, how do you confront that? What was going on in your world?
Yeah. I mean, that was a really tough period because, like I said, I had already been feeling burnt out. I'd already been kind of grappling with this, like, hey, I think this is kind of becoming too much of my life and too much of my identity. And what am I going to do around this? But especially when the pandemic happened, and in the Bay Area, we were quite locked down. And you weren't necessarily, if you weren't living with someone already, like you weren't, that was your social unit, right? So
putting on masks to go do my laundry in the laundry room down the hall, and like even numbers could do it on this day. It was a weird experience living in a big city in a tiny apartment.
Yeah. Well, and so, so for me, it was end of May 2020. It was right after George Floyd had been murdered. The world seemed like it was absolutely on fire. And then one day I have no more communication, right? The people that I kind of had been communicating with, that were workers, that were coworkers, that were, and friends, that were that, kind of connection to the world outside of my apartment, didn't exist anymore. And so that was a really stark of like, oh man, this is that. It wasn't good. It was really a rough time. I mean, I know that it was for everyone. But it was a very kind of stark change. And I think, I look back on it and I'm grateful, ultimately, because I think that I needed to leave. And I don't know that that's how I would have chosen it, because it was anyone who got laid off during the pandemic knows how weird of an experience that was, because you didn't there was no closure really in a lot of ways. You didn't get to say goodbye to people. You didn't even get your stuff. They're like, maybe you'll get your stuff in 4 months or ever, right? Whenever you left the office.
Just keep it. It's fine. I don't even want it.
But for me, it was I think I needed that change. I needed to move on from being there and doing, I needed to do something different. And so I'm glad that it happened, and that it kind of opened me up to pursuing other things. And I have on the journey line there, one of the things that was super impactful for me being at Culture Amp was that that was the first time I ever worked with a career coach. And I think previously I had always thought like the career coaches aren't for like normal people. They're for like really senior leaders and like executives and, high powered, high rollers or whatever. I didn't think that it was just, for your average person. But it is.
Yeah. Anyone can hire a career coach.
And it's super helpful.
Tell me a little bit about your career coaching. What did you learn? What was I'm going to ask 1,000 questions after you tell me about it.
Yeah, I think I started, I want to say it was 2016 or 2017, because Culture Amp had a coaching program, and we were able to get a coach, a personal coach that was outside of the org. And so it really helped me think about what are the things that I value? What are the things that are important for me? I felt like a lot of times I kind of was like banging around inside of this box that existed, of what was possible, or why wasn't I getting, the opportunities that I wanted here. And working with a career coach was like, the box doesn't exist. You don't need to worry about the box, because if the box isn't fitting you, then you find a new box. Like, don't worry about it. And having someone who actually is more focused on you and your development and what you need. And not that, your managers or whoever you're talking to within your org aren't worried about that, but like they're generally thinking about it in terms of the context of that org. Most of them are. Really great ones won't be, right? Really great ones will be helping you succeed whether or not it's at that org. But generally, it's limited to what's available there. And working with a career coach kind of got me thinking a bit more broadly of like, it doesn't need to be here. It doesn't need to be these things that have been laid out in front of me. It can be these other things, which in part is what started me on my thought leadership journey, because and my, building community within HR journey, because those were things that were really important to me. Those are the things that, I enjoyed. And I thought like, it can be my own thing. I can be pursuing this kind of thing on my own, regardless of where I am, because it's important. So, and different things like that really, having that touch point with someone over years. I had a session with her maybe a month or two ago. So she's seen me over a number of years, and I never noticed my own progress. But she is very direct and straightforward with me, which is fabulous. And she will say, hey, all of those things that you said you wanted however many years ago, you've done them all now. I'm like, oh shit.
Oh, damn. It's very forest through the trees. Sometimes somebody else has to. I think there's something really interesting and fun to kind of like pick at here. You have worked with this career coach at points over years. And I think sometimes we think of coaching as like a quick fix or like a point me in the right direction, but you've really experienced a long tenure with it. How, besides forest through the trees, I'm curious maybe how those conversations have changed, how your perception has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial work really was values work. It really was, what are the things that are actually important to you? And really kind of sifting through all the bullshit to get to the core, your like essentially core values. And I've gone back to those a number of times over the years and been like, especially when I feel like I'm in a rut or stagnant, I'm like, oh, right, because this isn't aligning with these values, or, I have gotten further away from these things that I said that I wanted. So it's really been helpful to kind of have that, North Star, as it were, throughout the years and come back to that. It's also really helpful though, right? Like, as I said at the beginning, I have never really created a plan. So, and I think what she has helped me with is like, I don't need a specific plan necessarily, but I need to know the things that are important to me and the things that I'm driving toward. And that's the kind of stuff. And also recognizing that sometimes that shifts and changes over time, obviously.
Absolutely. I think if you were to do a values exploration, just thinking about your career back when you were doing startups right after you graduated to a values exploration now, that probably changed.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So you have your career coach 5 years now. We go through everyone's favorite time, the pandemic. Your brain is on fire.
Yes.
And you move back, you leave the Bay Area.
Yeah. I think, as many did during the pandemic, you realize what is important to you or what you're lacking when your world is very small. And I think for many of us, our world got very small during that time. And people were thinking about what are the things that actually matter to me? What are the things that I actually need? And not being able to see my parents for a couple of years. And, I'm getting older, so they're getting older.
Right.
It kind of felt like I need to be closer to home. And I need to have I love the Bay Area. I just never felt like it was going to be possible for me to own a home. And that's one of the few things that I've always wanted for myself. And so I thought like, okay, this is the time. And I don't know that I'm going to, Phoenix is going to be permanent home for me, but I felt like in that moment that I needed to make that change. And it was also kind of one of those leaps in a way, because I had so much of my life and so much of my community was in the Bay Area, I'm not in my early, like, part of my life anymore where you're just making friends left and right. Like, it gets harder as you get older.
It does. I mean, to your point, like, the world gets a little smaller. You're not going to classes or you're not at a college campus all day. You are It's tougher to make friends.
Yeah. And people, everybody's doing their own lives and whatever that looks like. So I knew that it would be a big adjustment. But it felt like this was the thing, at least for now, to have my own space, to be close to my family, and to kind of just be in a different environment. Like I think after a while, it really felt to me, especially, commuting to San Francisco all the time, like being in this kind of nonstop grind in a way left me very burnt out. And, I got dumped into the pandemic and that was not a healing time, as one might imagine, right?
No.
That was stressful. So it felt to me like, yeah, I just need to be someplace that is going to give me a little bit more chill for a bit.
I mean, not during the summer, as we've already discussed, but emotionally chill.
Yeah.
Are you loving Phoenix?
No, honestly.
Okay. Great.
But, I think part of that too is I really, because of other things that are further down the journey line here, there are reasons why I haven't really gotten to, haven't built too much here. It's good. It's very good to be near my family. I like that I can just, go to lunch with my dad. And that's it, right? We don't have to spend 7 days together, 24 hours a day over Christmas.
Great. Just quick touch bases.
Yeah.
It's great.
And so I enjoy, same with my mom. I enjoy all of that. It's chill from that perspective. I'm starting to build community here, which is good. But, in terms of developing hobbies and having your spots and things like that, I haven't really gotten to that place yet. And that is a lot to do with just my own health, ultimately.
Which probably brings us to, as you said, kind of sliding down. You started having some headaches.
Yeah, that actually started in 2019. And even before pandemic, we were still going into the Culture Amp offices. There would just be certain times a day I would just start getting migraines. And I would get migraines more and more frequently. Throughout the pandemic, I was getting them more and more frequently and just feeling exhausted all of the time and really trying to debilitating, but I was doing the thing that I always try to do.
Push through.
Which is push through, right? Which is not great.
Is that not what you're supposed to do with your health? Because that is 100% the strategy I take far too often.
Yeah. I do that too much. But just kind of saying, I don't think this isn't normal. This isn't normal. This doesn't feel right. This is, too much. And then finally, after probably about 3 to 4 years of just going back to doctors again and again and again and saying, okay, I get it. I have migraines, but this does not seem normal. This is not,
this is debilitating.
Yeah.
I'm unable to function.
Yeah. And I'm having headaches every single day. I'm having, all of these symptoms. Finally found out that I had a blood clot in my brain.
I'm sure the news you were really jazzed to hear about.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm obviously grateful it was discovered. I think, you have that sense of, oh man, I escaped something that could have been much worse. And I could have had a stroke. I could have had seizures and I didn't. And on the flip side of that, which would be a whole other podcast, is that I had to advocate for myself for years to get a diagnosis for something because they weren't really looking into it or taking it seriously. Right. And so, which with women's health is often the case. So from that perspective, I feel much less lucky because I don't think I should have had to have argued with doctors for so long that what I was experiencing wasn't normal. But it was at least finally discovered. And that's, like I said, a lot of, when you are experiencing something like that, where you're in pain all the time and exhausted all the time, that's not the ideal, let's go make friends and start new hobbies environment.
No, you don't want to try a new hobby, fighting through a migraine and low key worried about your health. That's not a great space to make friends. And
yeah, I don't know that I would have been a real cheery companion.
oh no. Obviously like getting the diagnosis, awful journey. What has it been like since getting the diagnosis? How has the healthcare changed? How has maybe your lifestyle changed?
I mean, it's still a bit of a journey, and it has been, it's still trying to, anyone who I think has or has had someone who has a kind of medical issue that is not a very clear cut one understands that it can be really hard to navigate, really hard to get good information, good treatment. And so, I'm in a place now where I'm definitely feeling much better, but it is also ongoing, which is, not ideal.
No.
But it really, that plus all of the things we've kind of talked about in terms of like being, going into this grind and working so hard and having it be my identity and getting laid off and COVID and all of the, all of that kind of packaged together is obviously, an opportunity for reflection. So if anything, it really is a space to sit in and think like, man, what am I doing with my life? How am I spending my time? Am I spending it in the ways that I want to? Because if things had gone a different way, I wouldn't be here, right? So it does really cause that kind of reflection, and I think it has started to steer me in thinking about like, what are the things that are important? What are the things that I need from my career? What are the things that I need from the rest of my life? And yeah, it really, obviously, it brings a lot of those kinds of things into focus a lot more clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like so many of us got the opportunity to reevaluate our lives, and you did a few times over being pushed by fate.
Yeah.
But it looks like we kind of maybe we're headed on an upswing.
I think, yeah, and that's funny about I think my whole thing is just like up and down and up and down.
That's the best way. You're just a little ping pong ball.
I really am. I'm really just pinging and ponging all over the place. But at least I think not, when I look at that, I think at least I'm not afraid to make a change or, just try something completely different and change course. For me, I have kind of the up there because I think, I'm optimistic about with this new perspective that I have and also the opportunities that I've had at Pin where I've really gotten to craft a role that's my own. I've really gotten, because we're a small team and I have the trust of the founders to do things, like earlier this year, I said, hey, I think we should have a 50 over 50 women's list. Like, why doesn't that exist? Right. And people were like, well, make it. I was like, oh, okay, I will, I'm gonna make
Well, then go do it.
then I'll do the thing, that I had a kind of a similar thing with Tutor Boot where I was like, oh no, I kind of just want to do this thing that seems fun to me. And, me and my HR friends can talk about HR news and talk shit and, be nerdy and whatever. I was like, I'm just going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, So I have I think I have a bit more of that perspective of like, just try a thing, just do it. If it's something that makes you happy, that seems fun, that is engaging in some way or exciting in some way, just do it. And so
Just do.
Yeah, just do it.
Just. Side note, doubling back a little bit. If you haven't had the chance to go check out that 50 over 50 women in tech, it's really, really cool. Tutor Boot is really cool too. Yeah, go check out that stuff. What else? We have come to the end of your journey line. Things are looking bright. They're looking up. What else should we know? Where can people find you? Bring us on home.
Yeah, well, people can still find me at PIN. I will be, doing thought leadership about employee experience, probably on a webinar sometime soon. I am very much hoping that before the end of the year, I can take Tutor Boot, which right now is just videos that I post on LinkedIn, to actual podcast format so that people can find that more easily. So I'm excited about that. The Rowdy Rebels, which you very much know, are going to be in Austin at the beginning of October, which is going to be fun. And I'm looking forward to that and to more ways in which, our group can help HR folks, get rowdy, get rebellious, think about how to kind of rethink what HR is, what we're doing, what we're bringing into organizations. That's why I say I do feel like pretty optimistic about, the things that I'm doing, the community that I'm in. So hopefully more to come on that.
Hell yeah. Stacey, thank you so much for joining Journey Lines. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Go follow Stacey on LinkedIn or wherever else. We'll add all of her stuff, all of the socials down into the bottom. And don't forget to go check out her Journey Line. We'll see you next time.